Yep. And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mobile Fight Club experience. I'm your host, Pocholo Cruz. And with me is, well, who are you?
I'm a panel all to myself.
Yes, my panel of one.
Yes.
For
Yes,
now.
I'm Bryce Murphy.
Yeah. And we got a great show, I guess, for you. We're picking fights for UFC Fight Night 48. And then afterwards, begin fights for UFC Fight Night 49. But let's start with UFC Fight Night 48, which is in Macau, correct?
Yep.
All
There's
right.
all your favorite fighters on it.
Yes, all of your favorite fighters. Starting with the first matchup of Elizabeth Phillips versus Milana Godiva. Who are you picking for this one, Bryce?
I am going with Milana Dudieva. I'm not entirely
Yeah.
sure how to pronounce it. I've seen her fight many times, but Russian is one of the hardest languages for me to try to imitate. Not that I'm good at any of them, but Milana is primarily a grappler. She has a lot of submission wins. 6 of her 10 wins are by submission. She has gotten caught before. We saw Jessica Andrade, who's had success in the UFC, catch her in a guillotine after a grueling war. But in general, she's kind of known as a wrestler with a decent submission attack, who is fairly aggressive. She is not afraid to get into brawls and be aggressive both on the ground and on the feet. And Elizabeth Phillips likes being aggressive on the feet. And honestly, if Dudieva decides to stand with Phillips, Phillips has a chance of winning. She is not a great striker by any means. She's really not technical at all, as we saw in her fight against Valerie Letourneau in her UFC debut. But she is tough. She absorbs a lot of punishment. And Dudieva, as I said, has been caught. She's never been knocked out, but she has been rocked by Andrade and Penny Kianzad. So there is, if Dudieva doesn't play it smart, I could see this being a close fight. But really, if Dudieva plays it to her strengths and takes this fight to the ground, Elizabeth Phillips is really not known as a grappler, and Dudieva has the great wrestling and submission background there. So I definitely see a big advantage here for Milana Dudieva. The grappling is really where the difference in this fight is.
Okay. Thank you, Bryce. I'll go ahead with my pick. I'm going with Dudieva as well, because I like girls that can absorb a lot of punishment. A la
Oh,
50 Shades of Grey.
you're going with the wrong one then.
Oh, nice. Never mind. I wasn't really listening. This is the kind of show we're running here.
So
Man,
professional.
super. Hey, I'm actually wearing a shirt this time.
Progress.
I know,
Progress.
progress. Baby steps. Baby steps. And let's see. Ian is picking Dudieva as well. Nice. All right. On to the next fight. We have Yao Zaiku versus Roastin' Wee. Let's see. For this fight, I'm going with Zaiku because he sounds like a Dragon Ball Z extra.
And
Okay.
never thought of that.
Yep. And who are you picking, Bryce?
Well, you almost won me over with that reasoning, but no.
Missed it by that much.
Royston Wee and Yao Zakui.
Yeah, Zakui.
Zakui. Yeah, I
Zakui.
have no idea how to say his name. He was on The Ultimate Fighter China, which, great things from that season.
Big
Uh,
things.
yeah.
Yes, that.
Um, yeah, no, he fought the guy who is easily the best submission expert in the house, John Ping Yang, who, for relative to Chinese MMA, he's among the best submission grapplers you'll find, and Yao's background is in jiu-jitsu, so we'll see, or so, it was. He showed that he at least could defend the jiu-jitsu. He ended up going to a decision, and he got his back taken and was able to defend a rear naked choke. So we saw he at least had the jiu-jitsu to defend against what is a pretty high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner relative to Chinese MMA. He also has shown some power with he is also on Tough China. He had a knockout from guard, but that and 2 pro fights are all we've seen from him. Those 2 fights on Tough China, a pro fight where he was disqualified almost immediately, and another fight where he got a quick knockout. So he has power, but the striking that we saw in the Yang fight on Tough China really left a lot to be desired. He was extremely tentative, and Royston Wee, while really all we've seen from him is his wrestling, he does have decent wrestling technique. He showed he's strong. He took down Dave Galera in his UFC debut really easily. So for that reason, I have Royston Wee. I think he'll probably take Yao down and probably write out a decision via top control.
Okay. And let's see. Ian also has Wee. And Tad has Wee as well. Okay. On to the next bout. We have Wang and Colby Covington. Who are you picking, Bryce?
I'm picking Colby Covington. Wan An Ying is actually impressed me a little bit in his UFC debut. He's kind of strange. He's officially 2-0 in MMA. Both of his wins are by doctor stoppage.
Yeah.
And he has a Muay Thai background. He's done professional Muay Thai fights. He puts together combinations well. I actually really liked his striking. I was way ahead of Albert Chang, I believe is his name, the other Chinese fighter that he faced in his UFC debut. The question for him is, what does he have besides Muay Thai? On the Ultimate Fighter China, he showed that he has pretty much nothing else. And Colby Covington is a wrestler. He actually was the college roommate of John Jones, and trains at American Top Team. He is known primarily as a wrestler. This is an extremely easy pick. He will take Anying Wong down and wrestle him for a win. This is. I've been wrong before saying this is sort of a curse for me, but this is the easiest pick on the card. I mean, this is just Anying Wong has no wrestling, and he's going up against someone who is pretty much entirely a wrestler.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Bryce. For this fight, I'm going with Colby Covington as well. I did not know any of those things. I was just going with that because he sounds like a comic book hero.
You weren't going to go with the guy named Anying Wang?
I mean, that's hilarious. Anying Wang. All right. Moving forward. Actually, wait. Let's see who Ian picked. He's going with Covington as well. And surprise, surprise, Tad's going with Covington as well. So we'll clean sweep for Covington. All right. Next matchup we have Roland Delorme versus Yuta Sasaki. Let's see. For this, I'm going with Roland Delorme. And let's see. What's his nickname again, Bryce?
Used to be Stunny, and I'm not sure if it still is.
What? Well, I hope it's Sunny. Okay. Everything's sunny in Macau. All right. Who are you picking, Bryce?
I'm going with Yuta Sasaki. I do like a lot of what Roland Delorme does. I think he's a good grappler. He has really nice transitions in jiu-jitsu. We've seen him many times be able to catch guys from the bottom. But he does have a bit of a weakness with wrestling. We've seen guys who are really not known as grapplers be able to take Delorme down, and while that is playing with fire, be able to generally be okay. Edwin Figueroa was able to grapple with Roland Delorme, and while Delorme did end up winning a decision, that was really kind of an eye-opener to see that Delorme really Michinori Tanaka was his last fight. That was the one that really solidified my pick here. Tanaka, who is a good wrestler, was able to take Delorme down and top control him easily for 3 rounds. Really, really easy 30-27 decision. Yuta Sasaki can do that same thing. He is a good wrestler. He can take Delorme down, and he's a little more aggressive than Tanaka has been lately. Tanaka, a lot of the fights I've seen from Michinori Tanaka, who's Delorme's last opponent, he was super aggressive, and he wasn't against Delorme. We'll see how conservative Yuta Sasaki plays it, because being sort of a conservative wrestler really does kind of stymie the game of Roland Delorme, it seems. But Sasaki is pretty aggressive on the ground in most cases. He has decent ground and pound. For the most part, though, he has really good submissions. This could be a fun ground battle, but I think that the guy who's going to be on top more is Yuta Sasaki. He's the guy who will initiate the grappling. Neither one of them are really great strikers at all, so I see this as being a win via wrestling for Yuta Sasaki.
Okay, thanks, Bryce. Let's see, Ian is going with Sasaki as well, and Tad's going with Sasaki. Is Sasaki Japanese?
He is Japanese.
Okay. Just leave that. All right. Next fight we have is Alberto Mina versus Shinsho Anzai. Who are you picking for this fight, Bryce?
Well, I am going with Alberto Mina. This is, in many ways, it's kind of like the last fight where Anzai is a bit more of the wrestler, Alberto Mina more of the grappler. But this is a situation where I don't think Anzai is that great of a wrestler, and he doesn't hold top position all that well. He also is really small. I think that he's going to have a lot of problems at the UFC and at welterweight getting people down with his size. He's generally fighting Japanese fighters who are cutting a lot less weight or not cutting weight at all. And Alberto Mina is kind of a standard-sized welterweight. I think he can prevent the takedown and get a takedown of his own. Anzai, not particularly great from the bottom. I really like the grappling of Alberto Mina. He's really fluid. He is a guy who is very aggressive on the ground, but also holds positions well. He's not a great striker. He's someone who clearly comes to MMA with the background of grappling, but I'm really impressed with the grappling that I've seen. Sucks for him that he couldn't debut in Macau the first time. He was supposed to fight Zach Cummings, who came in, I believe, 8 pounds overweight, and that fight ended up being canceled. And Mina lives in Macau, so it's good that he's getting his hometown debut again. And I definitely think he'll come away with a win here against Shinsho Anzai. I think this is going to be a first-round submission.
Okay, thanks, Bryce. I'm going with Alberto Mina as well. And the reasoning for that is Mina sounds like Mina, and Mina sounds like Mini. And I don't know anything about Disneyland. And this decision's not going anywhere. So let's go on to who Ian picked. Mina as well. I've been meaning to tell you that. And looks like Tad is going with Anzai.
He is Japanese.
Oh, Anzai's Japanese? Okay.
Yep.
That's my case.
Anzai is actually, I can't believe he's coming down from middleweight. He's
middleweight.
He's 5'9".
5'9". Well, and he's not even stacked like Paul Harris.
He's bulky, but he's definitely not Paul Harris.
Or like even
Or Lombard or
Lombard, so not built like a tree trunk.
Nah,
Nice.
Nope.
Anzai. Oh, for viewers that don't know, Tad is Japanese.
And he likes picking Japanese fighters, even when he probably shouldn't.
Case in point. All right. Moving forward, we have Wang Sai versus Danny Mitchell. Okay. I'll go and make my pick. I'm going with Mitchell because he does not sound Chinese. Maybe half Chinese.
He is not at all Chinese.
Okay.
I can confirm that.
Can confirm. And he sounds pretty
also
American. I would say he probably knows how to wrestle.
Nah, he is from England.
maybe more semblance of wrestling.
He's a grappler.
All right, close enough.
Not a wrestler, but a grappler.
A lot more grappling than hopefully his opponent. All right, who are you picking, Bryce?
Yeah, I'm going with Danny Mitchell. Wong Sai was in that pretty terrible Ultimate Fighter China finale. You may, but hopefully may not remember. Basically, Wong Sai is not a very good striker. He's not a very good grappler, but he's not terrible at either of them. So he's won a lot of fights on the Chinese regional scene and got to the Tough China finale just by being sort of well-rounded, where he can, exploit the weakness of a lot of these other fighters. And he may have a slight striking advantage over Danny Mitchell, who is really not great there. Danny Mitchell has a tendency to basically just go in for takedowns and not really set them up at all. But I think he'll get Wong Sai down. Wong Sai was taken down a lot in the Tough China finale. He really very few people in China, their strength is wrestling. Very, very few have even decent wrestling in China. That's one aspect of Chinese MMA that hasn't really found its place yet. And Danny Mitchell has been able to take down guys who are much better wrestlers than Wong Sai. His lack of striking technique probably won't even be much of an issue. He gets a lot of really unique submissions. This is a guy who has a flying triangle choke on his record. He has a twister. So he goes for unorthodox submissions, and not saying he's going to get an unorthodox one, but considering how poorly Wong Sai held position in his UFC debut, this is a guy who got into mount and took the back multiple times and sort of just fell off. I think Danny Mitchell will have a big grappling advantage over Wong Sai and should be able to submit him.
Okay. Thank you, Bryce. Let's see who Ian picked. Ian went with Mitchell, and so did Tad. Went with Mitchell as well. Let's see who might have studied Japanese in high school. Okay. Let's go on to the next fight where we have
main card already.
Oh, it's main card?
I know, you can't tell with these fighters.
Look at all these name fighters, like Ning Gangyu versus Jianping Yang.
Fan favorites.
Yes. Yep. Yes, fan favorites. Who are you picking, Bryce?
I'm going with Jianping Yang. I will say this is actually not a bad fight. This is a delayed Ultimate Fighter China finale. They had 2 weight classes on the show. This is the featherweight finale. So they had welterweight and featherweight, and we saw the welterweight one, the first Macau card earlier this year. These guys one of them was injured. It was never announced who it was, but this fight is now happening on this Macau card. And these 2 fighters, clearly the best from Tough China, without a doubt. Ning Gangyu had 2 pretty highlight reel knockouts on the Ultimate Fighter China, and Jianping Yang showed he was easily the best submission guy there. He's the most experienced on the show and has, again, relative to Chinese MMA, really good jiu-jitsu. Ning Gangyu has shown... Well, he's shown power and improved striking, but from some of the fights he had early in his career, he's actually, the 2 guys he's lost to are pretty well-known guys. Kyung Ho Kang, who's in the UFC, and Asal Kwan, who's in, I believe he's in 1FC now. Or Road FC, excuse me, but he was in 1FC for a bit. So he's fought some experienced guys, but really the issue for Ning and the question mark for him is the wrestling and the grappling. When he fights Jianping Yang, can he stop the submission skills of Yang or the submissions of Yang, who is good at taking the back? Unlike a lot of the Chinese fighters that we've seen who are over-aggressive and don't hold position well, Yang really does. He's very methodical on the ground, so I think he has the advantage. It seems like a lot of people are going with Yang. I know Marty is going with Ning, and he had some... as I said, he had some highlight reel knockouts, and he could absolutely, if he keeps it on the feet and shows takedown defense, he can absolutely knock Yang out, who is really not great on the feet, serviceable in comparison to some of the other guys on Tough China, but his strength is clearly in the grappling. So this is interesting because this is sort of a striker versus grappler matchup, and unlike a lot of the other Tough China bouts, this is a matchup where the strength that these guys have is actually a real strength. It's not a relative one. So I'm going with Yang because I generally pick the grappler in these fights, and I think he can get Ning down and submit him. But this is actually a pretty interesting fight, and I think a pretty close one.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. I'm going with Yang as well because it's my buddy James Yang's birthday today. Happy birthday, James. Hope your cousin gets the win here. And next, let's see, Ian, as Bryce alluded to, is going with Ning. And Tad is going with Ning as well. But Ning's not Japanese, is he?
Nope, both Chinese.
Both Chinese? Maybe Ning really likes...
Ning is the guy who turned a lot of heads on Tough China. He's the one, like Yang is the guy who, when people came into Tough China, he was the one that kind of prospect nerds like me had heard of and had seen in regional MMA and Chinese MMA. Ning was the guy that really not many had heard of, who really turned some heads with his knockouts on the show.
All right. And on to the next fight. We have Zhang Weipeng versus Brendan O'Reilly. Okay. I'll go ahead, and I'm going with Brendan O'Reilly, for his dominating politics and Fox News TV show, for being maybe American and not Japanese or Chinese. Who are you picking, Bryce?
Well, if this was Bill O'Reilly, I would absolutely agree with you, but this is unfortunately the Australian Brendan the Badger O'Reilly.
Oh, the Badger. Does he have mutton chops?
He does have mutton chops.
Oh, as I would expect anyone named that Badger.
Yep. He was on the Ultimate Fighter Nations, and he fought Cajun Johnson in the first round and got absolutely wrecked by Cajun Johnson in a couple of different ways. First off, O'Reilly is pretty much entirely a wrestler, and he went to try to wrestle Cajun Johnson. Johnson beat him up in the clinch, opened up a big cut immediately, and then when O'Reilly got Cajun Johnson to the ground, Cajun basically outgrappled him immediately and submitted him. So really horrible performance by Brendan O'Reilly on the Ultimate Fighter Nations. I was actually shocked that they picked him up after that, especially considering that Cajun Johnson did not, lost to Tai Hung Bang in his UFC debut.
Tai Hung Bang.
And also Brendan O'Reilly in his regional fights, you look at his record, it's 5-0. He has, a couple submission wins, but you look at the guys he's fought, like for example, a 1-6 Mike Arts, and he actually had some trouble in these fights against really low-level competition. Like, he wasn't running through them. He was going in sort of back-and-forth grappling exchanges. And Zhang Weipeng didn't really impress me too much in the Tough China finale. His striking is really tentative, but it is fairly technical. He wasn't throwing enough, but what I did see, he was pretty compact and wasn't overextending. He looked like he clearly was training in striking and clearly had improved since his time on the show. But I don't really know where he is. He has some potential. His grappling is, like I said, with a lot of the Tough China guys, he had difficulty holding position, fell off of a back mount, and O'Reilly's really terrible at grappling too. He's a wrestler who tends to get in sort of disadvantageous positions after he takes people down. So I don't know. I think this could be a situation where O'Reilly gets the takedowns, it's sort of scrambly, and it goes back and forth. And honestly, I pick Zong because this is China. This fight is in China. I think he'll have the crowd behind him. I really don't know what kind of advantage hometown advantage is in MMA. I've been watching this sport for years, and I still don't really know how big of an advantage it is. But in this case, I know Li Penzong is bad, but I just can't pick Brendan O'Reilly. He's really a terrible fighter who does not belong in the UFC. I'm sorry to say, and Zong. I don't know. I feel like this is about as easy of opponent as the UFC can give Zong, and he very well may lose still. But I'm picking Zong. I don't think either one can get a submission here is the point, or a knockout. I think it's just going to be a back and forth scramble on the ground that'll be close, and they'll give the decision to Zong.
Okay. Next Bryce. Ian is going with the Badger O'Reilly as well. And Tad is going with O'Reilly Factor. Okay. Next fight we have, I might know this guy, is Tyron Woodley versus Dong Hwan Kim.
This is a bit of a step up.
Yep. Who are you picking, Bryce?
I'm going with Dong Hwan Kim, and I'm a little concerned about what Kim does here. Even though he's had a couple of highlight reel knockouts in his last two fights, I don't think this new fighting style that he's adapted of being really aggressive and swinging for the fences all the time is actually a very smart one. Kim got to the UFC with his incredible judo skills, and I think if he's going to continue to contend in the welterweight division, move farther up, I think he has to go back to that. But Kim is a guy who can grind on people with his judo. He has great throws, great top control, passes guard well, doesn't really do much when he gets to mount, and doesn't really do a ton of damage, but I really do like his judo skills and his grappling as a whole. And what sets him apart from Tyron Woodley, I think, is Woodley's cardio is a huge issue to me. I've said it before, but Woodley gasses out really quickly. Part of the reason is because he has a tendency to put everything into his strikes. He will throw for the fences, go for the fences, and throw just for knockouts, and that's worked. He's gotten some big knockouts, but he doesn't really cut angles well. We saw him really get out-positioned by Rory McDonald on the feet in his last fight. Of course, McDonald is fantastic at it, but Woodley was he made it way too easy. He moved back a lot. He was trapping himself against the cage, and Woodley just doesn't manage his gas tank very well. So I think Kim, if he goes to the strategy that got him to this point, I think he can use his judo to grind Tyron Woodley down, and Woodley will gas out. Woodley has good wrestling and is a powerful wrestler, but he's more of a powerful wrestler than an actual than a top control kind of guy, I should say. He gets a lot of power doubles, but in terms of actually keeping people on the ground, he has a tendency to let guys up a little too easily. Kim is better at control, I think. So. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm picking Dong Hwan Kim, but as I said, I'm a little worried about if Kim tries to stand with Tyron Woodley, because Kim's striking, even with his knockouts and his newfound power, is really sloppy, and he gets hit way too much, and you don't want to get hit by Tyron Woodley. So close fight, but I'm going with Kim if he chooses to use his judo.
Okay, thanks, Bryce. I'm going with Stun Gun Kim as well, but I do hold reservations for his newfound fighting style. He's now fighting like a second-rate Korean zombie as of late, but with far less polish in his striking.
A lot of power, though.
Yeah, a lot of power. That's very true. But I think Kim has just been a huge welterweight as well. So, but he leaves himself very open, like in his bouts against both Eric Silva and John Hathaway. He took a lot of damage, like a lot of unnecessary shots. And I believe if you take, as good as Eric Silva and John Hathaway are, I think if you give Tyron Woodley those same openings, he will put you to sleep. So I feel concerned for Stun Gun in that case, but I do believe that when it comes to his great judo skills, I do think that um, he can out. I mean, though Woodley is a powerful individual, he has been blanketed before by the king of Snuggies, Jake Shields, and I think Kim can replicate that factor. So here's the stun gun. See what happens.
And to be
Okay.
fair, the blanket you talk about was pretty much entirely wall install. Kim never really got him down, but he was able to keep Woodley against the cage and render him ineffective the whole fight.
You mean Shields?
Yeah, Shields.
Yeah. True.
Shields against Tyron Woodley. I mean,
Yep. Yes, he was. Well, just the magic of Jake Shields.
yeah.
Okay. All right. So Ian's going with Woodley, and Tad's going with Woodley as well. Maybe Woodley's Japanese. Okay. On to the main event of the evening. We have Michael the Count Bisping versus Kung Lee. And I'll go ahead and make my pick. I am going with Bisping. I think Bisping is still a top 10 heavyweight. He's never really shown like power in his strikes, but he has always shown a high volume striker. He's always been accurate, just well rounded, good takedown defense. He has been clipped, a couple of times, or can be clipped and dropped. But I mean, as a whole, like think about the guys that have been able to finish him, like Vitor Belfort, Dan Henderson.
That's it.
What's that?
That's it.
Yeah,
Those two.
that's it. I mean, those aren't. That's nothing to be ashamed of, since Dan Henderson can put. I mean, those two guys could put most mammals to sleep. So that's nothing to be ashamed about. And Michael Bisping, I mean, for all the hate that he gets, I mean, he does get a large amount of hate, but I think he's a very good middleweight. His wrestling skills aren't horrible. Like good anti-wrestling skills. Like Dave Chael in a good fight. Fought, was it Rashad Evans to a draw back at light heavyweight? And
no, I don't. That wasn't Bisping. That was actually Tito Ortiz.
No, did they fought to a draw?
Yeah.
I thought he lost. Okay, that was a draw. Okay. I think he lost the decision then. Lost the decision to Evans, but still,
he did. Yeah,
I think Bisping is still a very good fighter. Against like Kung Lee, I mean Kung Lee, known for his flashy strikes and his wicked. I guess his high amplitude throws comes from a Sancho background, but really he comes from a college wrestling background and Taekwondo. That's where his flash kicks come from, and that's where his throws come from too. His wrestling background, and he was just able to tailor those talents and then dominate the Sancho field. Because in Sancho, like throws actually count for a lot, and I believe there's also a rule that if you throw your opponent out of the ring 3 times, you win the match. So I'm sure wrestling has a great advantage in that case. But Kung Lee has always been rather small for middleweight. I mean, and Kung Lee has shown some power. He knocked out Rich Franklin. That was pretty impressive. But I still think Bisping is just a good volume striker. So at this point has good skills. Just stays busy, and Bisping usually just doesn't really gas. Has the gas tank can go 5-4 rounds, and I'm just favoring Bisping this one. I think he has all the advantages. So, or at least most advantages I'll favor. What do you think, Bryce?
Yeah, I'd say power is the one advantage that Kung Lee has.
Yeah.
But I mean, Kung Lee hasn't fought in 2 years. That's something that needs to be mentioned.
Really? It's been 2 years since the Rich Franklin fight?
It's been almost 2 years. The Rich Franklin fight was November of 2012, so
wow,
damn near 2 years. Bisping, though, has been fairly inactive, and part of the reason for that is that he had that nasty eye injury, if you remember, where he had the detached retina.
Yes.
So he came back and fought Tim Kennedy, and a lot of the
That was
things you
last year? Team Candy?
no, that was this year.
Okay.
This year, that was his first fight in a year, and a lot of the things you said about Bisping, we talked about before the Tim Kennedy fight. I absolutely agreed with you, but that takedown defense against Tim Kennedy just wasn't there. Part of it is Kennedy's a great wrestler and his puts a lot of pressure on his opponents, but Bisping was not on his game. He looked really sluggish. He was really tentative on the feet. He spent a lot of time basically just trying to defend takedowns and not doing a great job of it. So I really wondered in that fight how much of his eye was really bothering him, or how much of the recovery from that detached retina was an issue. And I mean, that's a big concern for me, especially when you have someone with the kind of power that Kung Lee has. Kung Lee is not. You mentioned his wrestling background, but Kung Lee really uses that defensively in MMA. He's not going to try to wrestle you. He is going to try to keep it on the feet. Use his side kick. He loves that side kick to spinning back fist combination. He has hard punches as well, as we saw in the Rich Franklin fight. So Kung Lee is trying to either kick you in the body so hard that you have to quit, or just knock your head off with a punch. And with Bisping's vision, that's a bit concerning to me, but that is the only reason that I could pick Kung Lee. I have to pick Michael Bisping here because Bisping is just the more well-rounded, more technical fighter, and as you said, he's equipped to go 5 rounds. He has great cardio. Cardio has been a huge issue for Kung Lee. You remember in that the Vanderlei Silva fight when he came back to the UFC, he was beating Vanderlei for the first round and then gassed himself out after a single round. I know middleweights are on the bigger side of things, but that's still not acceptable in middleweight. That's not something that's going to carry you very far. And obviously he looked a lot better against Patrick Cote, but against Cote, he was dealing with a guy who's a much less technical striker than him. Bisping really is a good technical striker for MMA terms. He's not going to go into pro kickboxing and do well, but in MMA he's good at, when he's not circling to Dan Henderson's power hand, he is good at distance. He is good at moving and kind of getting in and out quickly and jabbing. He's a good. And yeah, the takedown defense for him in the past has been very good. Obviously, it wasn't against Tim Kennedy, but that's sort of his game. Use wrestling defensively if he needs to, or, and this is my biggest point, he can use wrestling offensively if he needs to. He has had fights where he's taken guys down and won via ground and pound. A lot of his finishes, in fact, most of his finishes are TKOs with ground and pound. So if the wrestling advantage is there for him, he will use it. And Kung Lee, being 42 years old, you mentioned his wrestling background, but he's just been up against strikers in the UFC. Rich Franklin just struck with him. Patrick Cote was just a striking match. Vanderlei Silva entirely striking. Since he's come back, he hasn't had to face any wrestling. And with all the injuries Kung Lee has had and his age, I have a hard time believing he's going to be able to stop Michael Bisping's takedowns. His cardio, even just striking, is pretty bad. So for me, this is unless Bisping's eye is a huge issue and Kung Lee is able to take advantage of it, I think Bisping has this fight. It's a huge stylistic advantage for him, and this is a fight that Bisping should win.
Yep. Let's see. So Ian is picking Bisping as well as Tad. All right. So that's all.
Well, we do have odds for the last 2 fights.
Okay.
Yeah, none on the other Chinese guys that like 5
know.
people know about.
Yeah. The family knows.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I unfortunately know. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, about actually watching footage on these guys, without someone paying me to do so.
A badge of honor.
Yeah, in the co-main event, Tyron Woodley's about a -170 favorite.
Okay.
Jong Hyun Kim is about +140. Though both of us going with the underdog. In the main event, Bisping is about -300. Kung Lee about +250. Seems about right to me.
Okay. Okay, so want to take like 5 before going on to the next fight card?
Yeah, let's take 5, and right. We'll reconvene at 10:20.
Okay, rest easy, viewers. We shall return.
Yep.
All right. Hello, still patient viewers. We're now on to UFC Fight Night 49. I'm still Pocholo.
I'm still Bryce Murphy.
Allegedly. Allegedly.
Yeah, I mean, I can't prove it, but
Well,
you have to take my word for it.
I'll take your word for it, Bryce, if that
Thank
is
you.
your real name. Okay, let's go on to the first match. We have Wilson Heiss versus Joby Sanchez. Who are you picking for this one, Bryce?
I am going with Wilson Hayes, who is a very solid grappler. He was a featherweight for a long time, actually in Bellator, and dropped down to bantamweight. Now is at flyweight, and this is his first flyweight bout, and I'm kind of interested to see how he does because he's a big, bulky guy. So I don't know how his cardio will be at 125, but in terms of talent, he's interesting because he is a very good grappler. He has very imposing top control and isn't always the most aggressive guy on the ground, but he does have great submission skills when he chooses to use it. We saw in the Ivan Menjivar fight, he did just kind of try to ride out a decision. But let's keep in mind he had a very close fight with Yuri Alcantara, who's really a killer at bantamweight on his last fight. So Hayes is a legit fighter. Joby Sanchez is an interesting prospect in some ways. He trains at Jackson's and has some good grappling skills of his own. He gets hit a lot on the feet. Antonio Banuelos rocked him, and if you're getting rocked by Antonio Banuelos at this point, that's a little concerning. But he did beat Antonio Banuelos like just about every other flyweight. Beat him with a corner stoppage in the second round. He hasn't been able to cleanly knock anybody out so far in his MMA career. I think power is a bit of a question mark, but he was able to really punish Banuelos on the feet in the second round of that fight after honestly probably losing the first. So as a whole, Joby Sanchez has potential. Again, training at Jackson's, his striking, at least offensively, is good, even though he gets hit a lot. It's pretty basic, but he is getting better in the Eric Morwell and Antonio Banuelos fight. We've seen improvement. Again, decent grappling, but the point being that his grappling is simply not anywhere close to Wilson Hayes. Hayes, at least early on, being the bigger guy, should be able to get the takedowns. In the past, he's been very good at that. He's a wrestler or a grappler who does have takedown ability and does have wrestling. His striking is awful. So if Joby Sanchez can stop the takedown, Wilson Hayes has nothing for anybody in the UFC on the feet. He is tentative. He gets hit a lot. He is bad. He is just not. He should not be striking at all. But thankfully, he's a persistent takedown artist, and that's where I think he'll get Joby Sanchez. Joby Sanchez coming in on like 2 weeks' notice as well. So yeah, this is a situation where I have a hard time believing that Joby Sanchez can stop Wilson Hayes' takedown. So I think Hayes will either submit him or grind out a decision here.
Okay. Let's see. My pick, I'm going with Hayes as well. Essentially echo those sentiments. I think I'm very curious to see how former featherweight and then now bantamweight and now flyweight handles that. I mean, but he's been a fairly short guy. I believe he's about 5'4".
He's 5'4", I believe is the official height.
Official listed height. Okay, but yeah, if he's able to lose that, the extra bulk, he should be about, decent size flyweight.
UFC actually has him at 5'6", which is a little bit more than I've seen him at other times. Sherdog has him at 5'4", so.
Yeah, I think all 5'4", 5'6", but who knows? Maybe losing that weight made him grow a little bit. Okay, but yeah, I think he's got the grappling skills, and yeah, I think he should be pretty persistent in getting that takedown because that's where he has the advantage. So going with Hayes as well. And let's see. Ian is going with Hayes. And Tad is going with Hayes. All right. Let's go on to the next match. Next up, we got Ben Saunders, Killer B, versus Chris Heatherly. All right. I'm going with Ben Saunders. Hard choice, because I don't know who Chris Heatherly is. All right. Who is he, Bryce?
Chris Heatherly is a grappler. He's probably best known as the guy who Chidi Njokuani accidentally elbowed to the spine.
Ah.
That kind of made rounds on the internet. But and he was sort of writhing in pain and, you know, a fairly over-the-top way, and a lot of people thought he was milking it. But regardless, he's a very good grappler. He has a submission win over Dakota Cochran, who you may know.
Oh.
So, yeah, he really nice transitions on the ground. Really nice transitions. The problem is getting the fight to the ground. He leaves himself open for punishment on the feet. He has issues with defense. He gets hit way too much by low-level strikers. And, again, once he gets the fight to the ground, he's great. But, you know, Ben Saunders can handle himself fine on the ground. He's not a bad grappler by any means. He doesn't have a huge wrestling defense problem. But Ben Saunders, while he tends to get hit a lot on the feet too, is very good offensively. He has a lot of power. He has a lot of volume in his strikes. Ben Saunders is a violence machine. Let's put it that way. He loves to get in wars and brawls and take a shot to land a shot. And against Douglas Lima, not the best strategy. He actually is coming off of a loss, even though he's fight. But against Chris Heatherly, Saunders will have a massive striking advantage, and this is the kind of guy. Saunders loves guys who are hittable, and he will just demolish Chris Heatherly on the feet. That's first round knockout for Ben Saunders. I think Heatherly does have a future in the UFC if he can improve his striking defense and be able to use just be able to strike for a little bit to set up his wrestling and be able to get guys to the ground more because he is very good there. But right now, Ben Saunders should easily win this fight.
Okay. Let's see. Ian is picking Saunders, and as is Tad. So here's hoping Killer B gets the win.
Yep, right. And there are odds for this fight.
Okay.
Ben Saunders minus 350, Chris Heatherly plus 290.
Okay, but no odds for the first match?
No odds for the first match. I think that's the only fight on this card that doesn't have odds.
Okay. Well, let's go on to the next match. We have Aaron Phillips versus Matt Hobar. All right, who are you picking, Bryce?
Well, if Marty was here, he would talk about how terrible Matt Hobar is. Marty is not a fan of him. And honestly, I don't think Matt Hobar is a great fighter either. I think Hobar is really bad on the feet. He gets hit way too much, and his technique is awful. He just throws punches with, just wings his punches, and is not. He needs to tighten up his striking, and his grappling and wrestling is not so overpowering that he's going to have success in the UFC doing it. Aaron Phillips is a guy who's fought in pro kickboxing matches. He is a very good striker in kickboxing. I really like his kicks and his use of distance in kickboxing. He's very good at using his kicks and leg kicks to set up distance and come inside with punches that are pretty hard. The problem is when you watch Phillips in MMA, it becomes very clear that the takedowns, the threat of takedowns, changes his entire style. He becomes super tentative in MMA matches. He doesn't use his kicks almost at all. because of the fear of takedowns. So he spends a lot of time backing up and trying to basically trying to run away from his opponents almost. He ends up getting hit a lot because he gets put against the cage. He gets out wrestled. He really has had a hard time adapting to MMA in terms of in terms of striking. Some lesser fighters that he's fought and guys who aren't able to get him down, because once he gets to the cage, his wrestling defense is actually pretty good, and there he can strike in the clinch and gets separate and work his strikes. But in general, he's been hit a lot, and in his fight against Sam Sicilia in his UFC debut, when Sicilia played with him on the feet for a bit, Phillips was able to have some success. It was a close first round. But once Sicilia saw that his wrestling was an issue, Sicilia just went full throttle for the takedown at the start of each round. Second round, immediately took Phillips down. Third round, immediately took Phillips down. And that's what Matt Hobar is going to do. Matt Hobar is a somewhat decent wrestler, and he's very aggressive with his wrestling. Hobar is a guy who likes to come in at the start of fights and try to take people down. Even if he doesn't get the takedown, Phillips is just going to be fearing that takedown the entire time, and from there, Hobar can at least spend a lot of time grinding him against the fence and making it his fight. Phillips is going to be either on his back or backing up the entire time. I have a hard time believing that Aaron Phillips has improved his MMA striking enough to separate and be able to fend off Hobar's takedown. So I have Matt Hobar winning this probably by decision, but he could get a submission or TKO as well.
Okay. Thanks, Bryce. I'm going with Hobar as well, simply because he has a funny sounding name. To think of hose and bars.
Do you like his nickname?
No, what's his nickname?
The Crowbar.
Very clever. I'm sure. Yes, actually, I do remember Ian talking about this guy. Okay.
Well, Aaron Phillips is the model.
Yes. He has some great nicknames. All right. Let's see. Who is Ian going with? Oh, surprisingly not Hobar. Aaron Phillips for Ian. And Tad is going with Hobar. The Crowbar. Okay. The next match.
No, we actually have odds.
What's that? Oh,
we
wait,
have odds.
Odds.
Yeah. Minus 220 Hobar, plus 180 Aaron Phillips. I think that a lot of people are. I don't think that a lot of people are making the same analysis of Aaron Phillips that I am. I actually think Aaron Phillips is better at what he does than Hobar, but I think that I get the sense that the people are higher on Hobar than us. I saw a lot of people picking Matt Hobar against Pedro Munoz, which was just, to me, asinine. I didn't understand that at all. So I don't know if Hobar is actually well regarded by some people in MMA circles, or people putting money on him, or if they see the same thing I do. I don't know. But regardless, Hobar is a big favorite here.
Well, that is curious. Most curious. Okay. Well, now we're on to the next fight. Beneil Dariush versus Tony Martin. Who do you got, Bryce?
I have Beneil Dariush. He lost. He's coming off a surprising loss to Ramsey Najem, who came out like a beast in that fight and destroyed Dariush on the feet. But in general, Dariush's striking is actually not bad. He got hit a ton against Ramsey Najem, but against Charlie Brenneman, who, granted, Brenneman has to be towards the end of his career at this point, gets knocked out all the time. Dariush looked very good. His movement was solid. He landed a big shot on Brenneman when he was able to get the fight to the ground. He trains at King's MMA, which I've said many times is one of the best Muay Thai or gyms for Muay Thai-related MMA skills. And Dariush is a fantastic grappler. He is a one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the UFC just in terms of pure grappling skill. And while Martin's strength is in grappling as well, Dariush has him beat by a mile in that sense. And Tony Martin is not a great striker himself. This is a situation where it's two guys with very similar skill sets, and one of them is way better in that skill. So Dariush is the way better grappler, and I actually think Dariush is the better striker as well. Martin is really not much of a striker, and Martin actually has issues getting takedowns as well. He's not a particularly fantastic wrestler. So not to say Martin's bad. He is very solid at jiu-jitsu, and maybe he's able to fend off Dariush on the ground, but I'd actually be pretty surprised at that. I think Dariush can submit him, or if Dariush isn't able to submit Martin, he can knock him out on the feet or win a decision. I just don't see how Tony Martin wins this fight.
Okay. Thanks, Bryce. I'm going with Dariush as well. I, too, was pretty surprised in that Ramsey Najem loss. But, I think he just kind of blasted out of that fight. I don't know if his first one was just a case of him of Brenneman being bad or Dariush being good, but I guess we'll see in this next fight. But I still think I like what I've seen from Dariush. Good timing and patience on striking, and then good finishing ability. So I still think he takes this match as well. Ian's going with Dariush, and Tad's going with Dariush as well. And what are the odds?
Minus 120 Dariush, plus 100 Martin.
Okay.
Really close.
That is pretty close. All right. Next fight, we have Neil Magny, one of Ian's favorite fighters, versus Alex Garcia. Okay. Go ahead and make my pick. I'm going with Alex Garcia because I remember the Nickelodeon show The Brothers Garcia. It was a horrible show.
God. I'd completely forgotten about that.
Oh, man. Well, I'm bringing up those memories. But I think, as bad as that show is, I think Alex Garcia is pretty good. And who are you picking, Bryce?
I'm going with Alex Garcia. He is small and stocky, but he packs a big punch. He's very aggressive, and he tends to put pressure on guys. He also is a pretty solid grappler as well, which I think a lot of people forget because he's kind of known for some highlight reel knockouts. Trains at TriStar. Neil Magny's been improving a lot. I've been impressed with his use of distance on the feet. He is starting to use his reach more, but Magny's issue is still in the grappling. He's not particularly great there, and we saw him get controlled pretty handily by in his last fight. He kind of surprisingly lost the first round and was controlled by Rodrigo Monstro, who was making his UFC debut. So, I mean, Magny is going to have to really use his reach well to keep Garcia at bay. Garcia just being super aggressive and also a pretty decent striker himself who can chain wrestling into his strikes. I think that's going to be a challenge that Magny isn't going to be able to overcome. And once Garcia gets close to you, he has a pretty insane killer instinct. So I definitely like Alex Garcia to finish this fight either by knockout or by rocking Magny and submitting him. Garcia actually has a submission win over Chris Heatherly, who I mentioned earlier as being a great grappler. So that's a big accomplishment. So yeah, definitely Alex Garcia in this fight. I think he's going to make a lot of noise in the UFC welterweight division going forward.
Nice. And Ian is picking Garcia as well, and so is Ted. And odds?
Minus 145 Garcia, plus 125 Magny.
That's still fairly close.
Closer than I would expect, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. Next fight, we have Chaz Skelly versus Tom Ninamaki. Who are you picking, Bryce?
Now, this is a close one. I ultimately am going with Tom Ninamaki. I loved his grappling against Hanayaya, being able to not only counter Hanayaya's pretty intimidating jiu-jitsu game, or pretty strong jiu-jitsu game, I should say. It doesn't really matter if he's intimidating, but a very strong jiu-jitsu game and really strong top control. And Ninamaki was able to reverse Yaya multiple times. He was able to out-wrestle Yaya, really put on a grappling clinic in that fight, and then took in his second UFC fight, he took Nick Backstrom down, and then got caught in the clinch by a really unique submission, a bulldog choke, just kind of an old school one. I don't really blame Ninamaki for that. That was a beautiful submission from Nicholas Backstrom. So I'm still high on Ninamaki's grappling. The Backstrom loss didn't really do anything to change it. I think that Ninamaki has very, very good jiu-jitsu, and Ninamaki is also a decent striker. He was known as a well-rounded guy before he got to the UFC. He has some nice knockouts on the feet. He has good knees, and he uses. He's very good at pushing the pace, getting guys against the fence, and then from there he will often take them down and kind of chooses to use his wrestling more. But he also can use his knees in the clinch, and I've seen him knock people out with his overhand right. So Ninamaki is a very well-rounded fighter who pushes the pace, and Chaz Skelly has a tendency to get hit a lot. I really like Chaz Skelly. I think he's a good wrestler, and he's one of those guys who comes from a wrestling background but is actually very good at jiu-jitsu as well. Comes from Team Takedown, you may know as Johnny Hendricks' camp. Jared Rochalt there as well, so comes from a background of great wrestlers. But Chaz Skelly he gets hit way too much on the feet. He's overly aggressive and is really inaccurate and tends to just absorb punishment. So he needs to get this fight to the ground. Ninamaki knows that, and Ninamaki is well-rounded enough to keep the fight on the feet and or at least control the fight on the feet. And then if the fight goes to the ground, I think it's going to be Ninamaki who decides that. So I have Ninamaki winning this fight, but the reason that it's close is if a ground battle between these two could be really interesting. Both have good wrestling, as I said, and both also have strong jiu-jitsu to go along with the wrestling. So they both have the potential to reverse or put each other in bad situations on the ground, and both really like to grapple. That is where they tend to want to do their work. So I think if Ninamaki keeps the fight on the feet, that'll be the best case scenario for him, and he can win the fight either by knockout or a lopsided decision. But if either of them gets the fight to the ground, then it starts to become really interesting and really close. So it really depends on what the strategy is for Ninamaki, but I think Ninamaki has the skill set to take this with his striking.
Okay. Thank you, Bryce. For this fight, I am going with Chaz Skelly because I had a gym teacher in high school named Skelly, and he was very strong. And if Chaz Skelly's half as strong as Mr. Skelly, then he should be pretty strong indeed. I mean, that guy was like bench pressing 300 pounds, so like 65 years old or something.
I remember Mr. Skelly.
Funny Mr. Skelly. All right. Ian's going with Ninamaki, and Tad's going with Ninamaki as well. Is Ninamaki half Japanese?
He is not, to my knowledge.
He is what?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Yeah, because he looks pretty white to me. All right.
But anyway, I can tell you Chaz Skelly is not Japanese. He's even whiter.
First off, Chaz.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also the scrapper.
The scrapper Skelly. Nice.
Odds Tom Ninamaki is -140. Chaz Skelly +120.
Okay. Okay. Now on to the next fight. We have James Vick versus Valmir Lazaro. Who are you picking, Bryce?
I am picking the underdog in this fight. I like Valmir Lazaro to win this. James Vick has been incredibly inactive. That's not really the reason for my pick, but it makes me I don't really know where he is at this point in his career. He's a bit of an unknown. He's looked really impressive at times. He has a ton of power. We all know that he's a huge lightweight, and even though I'm not the biggest Lloyd Irvin fan, like at all. He is a very good jiu-jitsu practitioner and jiu-jitsu coach, and James Vick continues to train with Lloyd Irvin, and his jiu-jitsu is improving quite a bit. We saw him run through Ramsey Najem using his wrestling and jiu-jitsu. So I like James Vick's potential, but it is really hard to tell where he is at this point. Valmir Lazaro is an absolute killer, or has been on the regional circuit. This guy has long limbs and a really strong Muay Thai game. He knocks people senseless. He targets the body a lot. He's one of those guys who mixes up strikes to the head and body really well. Uses a really powerful but also very technical Muay Thai game. He's the kind of guy who will pick you apart and then knock you senseless. He will go through your guard, punch you, kick you in the body, wear you down, and then land a huge strike to finish you. I really love the striking of Valmir Lazario. I'm really glad the UFC signed him. And he also trains at Nova União, which for the lighter weight classes, that's about as good of a camp as you can be at. And Lazaro is pretty much entirely a striker from what he's seen. He really hasn't been taken down in years, and so it is hard to tell where exactly his jiu-jitsu game is, or his wrestling in general. He's just such a powerful striker that he hasn't needed to, and no one's really been able to compete with him in a long time in MMA. He's been running through people in Jungle Fight and Shudo, which are really solid Brazilian regional promotions. So there is a chance that James Vick comes in and out-wrestles Lazaro, but I really like that Lazaro trains in Nova União. I think his jiu-jitsu will, he has to pick up something training with those guys. Fantastic jiu-jitsu practitioners there, also fantastic Muay Thai practitioners there. As I said, it's a great camp for lighter weight classes, and as powerful as Vick is a guy who is a big target and kind of slow at lightweight, and a guy who, because of his size and his aggression, I have questions about his cardio. So I think Lazaro is much more technical. He'll pick Vick apart on the feet, and I think he's going to knock James Vick out. So yeah, I think Vick can win it with wrestling, potentially. But I think the more likely scenario is a knockout from Lazaro, so I have Lazaro winning this fight.
Nice. Thanks, Bryce. For this fight, I'm going Vick, and because he's not currently in a quarterback battle and is not facing any allegations of dogfighting. Okay.
That's good. It's good for him.
Oh, it is good, thanks. All right, and Ian is picking. Let's see, not hyphy bud.
Picking Cali Muscle. Yep.
Yep. He's going with Vic and Tad going with Vic as well. All right, and odds.
Odds are going with Vic as well. He's minus 150 to Lazaro plus 130. All you guys are going to see on Saturday.
We're going to see
you guys
a mobile quarterback.
No, James Vick he's not the quarterback he used to be when he was with the Falcons.
Oh. Well, as long as he's half the quarterback he was in Madden 2004, that's all I need.
No, okay. I think Valmir Lazaro is a killer. I think he's going to have a great future in the UFC lightweight division.
Nice. Okay. Next fight we have Max Holloway versus Clay Collard. I'll go ahead and start. I'm going with Max Holloway. I mean, this was a last-minute change on this on the card, right? This Clay Collard,
less than a week.
Yeah, it has less than a week's notice. I mean, Holloway is a tall order, not just because he is tall for featherweight, but also because he's a very good fighter. Has really fought has had a pretty tough run at featherweight, and still has a. Let's see, he's lost to Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, I want to say.
Yep.
And has he lost anyone
And
else?
he lost to Bermudez, but
Oh
didn't
yeah, and
lose to
that's
Bermudez.
yeah, and that was a very closely contested fight against Dennis Bermudez,
It
who looked
was.
amazing against Clay Guida, by the way.
Yep.
Yep,
Bermudez is a legit contender.
exactly. So I think Holloway is also a legit contender. I mean, young, he's what 23, 24.
Yeah, he is pretty young. Let me check. I know Collard's 21.
Okay.
Holloway's 22. So yeah, 22 years old, very young.
That's young guns going at it. And yeah, I just like Holloway. I think Holloway takes it. I really don't know which one I call it. Um, what about you, Bryce? What are your thoughts?
Well, you know Pocholo how much I like Max Holloway.
Yes.
I've said before, I think he is a fantastic striker. I love the way he incorporates kicks in unorthodox spots in MMA. You don't see people throwing spinning back kicks against the cage, and Holloway loves to do that. He's improving his wrestling a lot. We saw him submit Andre Fili. I mean, a lot of people, including I myself, had him beating Andre Fili, but to actually submit Andre Fili, nobody had that. Um, but if this fight was not short notice, I actually might have picked Clay Collard.
Oh wow.
I think Clay Collard is one of the top prospects in all of MMA. And it kind of pains me to say this because he had a drug suspension outside the UFC, so I'm not huge on UFC signing guys who pretty recently have been suspended. But this guy is an absolute legit prospect. He fights a lot like a young Matt Brown. He has the same type of ability that Matt Brown has come up with recently, where he has that ability to get people against the cage and deal insane amount of punishment to them. Collard does that. He traps people against the cage and then unloads with big shots. He also has really good wrestling, and while he doesn't intertwine the two very well, which I think is something he's going to work on or has to work on later in his career, or as his career progresses, because I think that's a fantastic opportunity when you have someone against the cage to be able to be deceptive and change levels. He kind of will. When he wants to wrestle, he makes it very obvious. He'll sort of run in and go for a takedown, and it's not very deceptive. But his actual strength and his actual wrestling technique itself is very good. But yeah, he is a violent fighter. He is a guy who will, as I said, put people against the cage and just deal in unorthodox or just a crazy amount of damage to them. I think he's really impressive, and he's a tall guy himself. You mentioned that Holloway's big for featherweight at 5'11". Collard is also 5'11", and is also young at 21 years old. So Collard is going to have a big future in the UFC if he can, not get suspended for drugs. But he is a guy who is very big for featherweight, and that's part of the reason I'm not picking him here, because I think cardio is a bit of an issue for him. He has had a tendency to fade a little bit in some later rounds of fights. He's had 2 fights with Justin Buchholz, who you probably know is a former UFC fighter and a member of Team Alpha Male, and he actually was destroying Justin Buchholz in one of those fights and then got caught with a guillotine late. But he also had a split decision fight where he was winning and then kind of gassed towards the end. So cardio is a bit of an issue, and this was at lightweight. He is going down to featherweight, so weight class below, already being big and having some cardio issues in the past. Holloway has fantastic cardio. The only time he's ever had any cardio issue was when he took a fight on less than a week's notice against Leonard Garcia. Every other time, his cardio has been very, very good, and he's won fights with his cardio. So that's a huge concern for me. Also, Holloway is the kind of guy who can counter Collard's attacks. because Holloway has a lot of great techniques to be able to get outside of people's range. A part of the reason, part of what I mentioned with the spinning back kicks, he's able to use unorthodox strikes to put himself at distance and get himself out of bad situations. So I love Max Holloway's striking, and I think he can keep distance and be able to escape if Clay Collard puts him against the cage. But the one thing that concerns me is when Holloway fought Will Chope, it took him about 3 or 4 minutes to adjust to not having a reach advantage, something he's used to. Chope had a reach advantage in that fight, and he was getting hit a lot more than he usually does. Collard has a very long reach and is Holloway's size, so Collard is not Will Chope. Collard is a guy who, if you let him put you against the cage and let him get off first, he will punish you for it. So I'm a little worried about that for Holloway, but I hope and I think he's learned from that experience with Will Chope. And honestly, Holloway is just the guy with the better cardio and the better overall striking game. So I like Max Holloway here, but this is a closer fight than a lot of people realize, and Clay Collard is going to have a great future in the UFC.
Nice. And next, Ian is picking Holloway, as is Tad. What are the odds for the match?
No odds that I can see, actually. Partly because this fight was thrown together at the last minute.
Yeah. Okay. On to the next match. Oh, Francis Carmo versus Talis Latis. I will go ahead and make my pick. I'm going with Talis Latis. I think Latis has always been an excellent grappler, and I really think that is the avenue in which he wins this fight. Carmo is a very athletic and large middleweight, but he has won some dubious decisions, and his main tactic is also just pretty much attempting to out-wrestle or just clinching, and a lot of walling and stalling, and I think just getting that close or just that close range against such a good grappler as Talis Latis and having an avenue for him to get to the ground is just trouble. I mean, Talis Latis has just shown, and this will be his fourth fight back in the UFC.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So he's fought Watson,
right. Watson, Herman, and Smith.
Herman Smith, yes, he has. And he's pretty much wiped the floor with all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, while Carmo is indeed the best guy he's going up against, I still like Latis in terms of grappling. He's just extremely smooth, very technical. Just shows way more. It's very aggressive on the ground. Looks for takedowns. Just pretty much. He took a lot of flack for his title fight against Anderson Silva, but I really think that was years ago, and I think Talis Latis now is a much improved fighter from what we saw. Yeah, and I think Talis Latis wins this match. What about you, Bryce?
Yeah, Talis Latis is completely different than what we saw in that Anderson Silva fight. You can tell he learned from it because, in the Silva fight, he was pulling guard all the time. He was not pushing the pace at all. He couldn't take Silva down, so he was just flopping and, trying to bait Silva into his guard. Now he's super aggressive. We saw in the Tom Watson, Ed Herman fights, he is in fights outside the UFC, like with Matt Horwich and Tor Trong, he will push you up against the cage, which I know that doesn't sound like something that's super exciting, but here's the thing, Talis Latis is getting aggressive. He is pushing his wrestling. He has learned how to wrestle. He is not just falling back on pulling guard. He will force you to the ground. He has realized that he wants to grapple with you, and people aren't going to jump in his guard, so he's pushing the issue. He's forcing guys to the ground, and he has some power on the feet too. He's not a great striker, but, ask Trevor Smith. He has some power. He's coming off of a 45-second knockout. So, Francis Carmo super tentative. You mentioned the wall install tactics. That's not going to do it against Thales Latus. You don't want to grapple with Thales Latus in any capacity. Carmo is actually a fairly technical kickboxer when he chooses to be, but I was really disappointed in his fight against CB Dalloway because that was a fight where he couldn't do his wall install, and it wasn't a situation like the Jacare fight where he got taken down a lot. The Dalloway fight, he got outstruck by Dalloway, and Dalloway is improving a lot on the feet, but Carmo, even with his kickboxing ability, he didn't let go. He was still super tentative. He was still sort of waiting and trying to find openings that weren't there, or trying to find openings to a degree where he wasn't pushing for his openings. He wasn't making his openings. He was waiting, and Dalloway didn't make the mistakes. Dalloway pushed the pace in that fight and was able to come away with a really lopsided decision. And Thales Latus, while he does not have the striking ability that CB Dalloway's developed, Latus pushes the pace. Latus is an aggressive guy, and Carmo is not going to be able to wall install or lay and pray his way to victory here. Carmo has to use some of his kickboxing. He has to use his wrestling defensively, and we haven't seen him be able to do that effectively. So for me, Thales Latus is the guy who's going to be more aggressive. He's the guy with the big grappling advantage, and he's a huge welterweight or huge middleweight himself. So I don't even think he's going to be at really that big of a size disadvantage here, at least in comparison to some of the other guys that Carmo has fought. So I like Thales Latus in this fight.
Okay. Thanks, Bryce. Let's. Looks like. Hang my computer first.
Ian has Latus, and Tad has Latus.
Tad has Latus. Well, all right, clean sweep. And what's the odds say?
Minus 150 Carmo, plus 130 Latus.
Really?
Yeah. I still have seen people after the 2 losses in a row saying Carmo is a future title holder. I do not understand that for the life of me. Not to say Carmo is bad, but no, he's not a top 10 middleweight even. What do I know?
Yep. These 2 guys talking about MMA. All right, on to the co-main event. We have Mike Pyle versus Jordan Mann. Who are you picking, Bryce?
Jordan Meehan is going to win this fight. I like Mike Pyle, great grappler, who was on a pretty solid run knocking people out. But Pyle is towards the end of his career. His chin is not especially great anymore. And Jordan Meehan is a really technical kickboxer with some great power. We saw what Matt Brown did against Mike Pyle, where Brown used his fantastic clinch ability and just wrecked Pyle. Meehan, while is not as good as Matt Brown at doing that, Meehan is also better in the open than Brown, and Meehan is fantastic against the cage. We've seen that multiple times. We've seen that against Forrest Petts in score fighting in Canada. We saw that again in his UFC debut against Dan Miller. When he gets people against the cage, he is ruthless. He is a finisher, and he's also very smart. He doesn't jump into people's guards. We saw, Dan Miller get him to the ground, and he escaped a fantastic armbar in his UFC debut. But he also, he didn't jump in and be ultra aggressive when he knocked Miller down. He waited for his opportunity, and he dished out punishment, over a period of time. He continued to apply punishment without gassing himself out or without putting him in danger of getting submitted, much in the way that Matt Brown does. So, to me, Jordan Meehan has the ability to, much like Brown did to Pyle, get him against the cage, because Pyle's not a super aggressive, or not a, I shouldn't say super aggressive. He is not great in the clinch. We saw James Head actually land a solid strike against him in the clinch and rock him. So Pyle, clinch is not Pyle's game. and Meehan can get Pyle in the clinch. He can dish out punishment until he rocks or knocks Pyle out, and if Pyle folds, Meehan's not going to jump in and risk getting submitted by Pyle. So I like Jordan Meehan in this fight. It's a great stylistic matchup for him. He's the younger, fresher fighter who has taken far less damage. He's the more technical striker, and yeah, I mean this should be a big statement for Jordan Meehan here.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. I'll go ahead and go with my pick as well. I am picking Jordan Meehan. I do agree that he'll make a big splash in this fight. I mean, he had a little bit of a hiccup in his last fight, which was a closely contested contest. But then again, that was Meehan's first fight in a year, I want to say, or over a year.
Yeah, he had that long layoff.
The last fight before that was the map, right?
Yeah, it was over a year. It was 13 months. Or actually, no, sorry, that was not 13 months. It was 12 months. My math is wrong.
Anyway.
Yeah, but a year.
Anyway, I like Meehan, very good kickboxer. Tough young kid. Has shown, vicious finishing ability, and I mean, all these factors, like now that he's getting in momentum, had that close win, is like now fighting regularly, and training regularly. I think Meehan is poised to make a statement. And I think he'll do that against Mike Pyle, who's one of the best fighters on the planet. I mean, I beat Mortal Kombat with Mike Pyle, but I think he's gonna get beaten like Mortal Kombat when Meehan lays his hands on him. So yeah, those are my thoughts. And looking from our peers, Ian is going with Meehan, and Tad is going with Meehan as well. And what did odds say?
Odds are going with Meehan as well, minus 220. Mike Pyle plus 180.
That's pretty fair.
Yep.
Okay, and on to the main event. We have Benson Henderson versus Rafael dos Anjos. And I'll go ahead and make my pick. I'm going with smooth Ben Henderson. I think Henderson looked really good in his last fight against a very tough Rustam Khabilov.
Very underrated.
Yes, very underrated, very good wrestler, was very scrappy. It was a very close contest. It was actually one where Henderson found himself on his back a lot because Rustam was a very good wrestler, but Rustam was also a good Khabilov, a decent striker as well. Very exciting bout. Just saw the creative get back up. Just his fourth round, just saw Henderson's finishing ability. Was able to catch Khabilov with an uppercut, like have him stunned, and then get the choke like that. And one of the most, actually, probably one of the most emphatic finishes that Henderson has had in his career, and I think he looked very, very good in that. I think Javier dos Anjos, his first finish in 4 years. Yeah, the last finish must have been like Donald Cerrone back in WEC.
Yep.
For the championship, the rematch. But yeah, first finish in 4 years, just looked really good. And I don't think Khabilov had Khabilov ever been finished before?
I don't think so. I mean, Henderson was obviously a huge step up in competition for him, but no, he's never been finished.
Yeah.
Or hadn't been finished until the Henderson fight.
Yeah. Tough lightweight. I think Javier dos Anjos is a very good lightweight as well. And I think he poses a threat to Henderson. Like Anjos' striking, dos Anjos' striking is decent, but his grappling is really his forte, like his black belt. And that, like, very good grappler. He's just very well-rounded, just a tough fighter. But I just think Henderson's combination of his cardio, his wrestling, his still not a huge fan of his striking, but he's shown more pop in his punches, and just his and he's always had that awesome scrambling ability. I think that those are the factors that will have him win this fight. And yeah, I think Henderson continues his winning streak. What do you think, Bryce?
Yeah, I like Benson Henderson here. Henderson makes you fight his game. That's really his big strength. Is he may not be the best striker out there. He may not be the best wrestler out there. Not to say he's bad at either of those, but Henderson makes you fight his fight. He puts you against the fence. He makes it a grinding affair. He does damage with leg kicks. He slows you down. He has insane cardio, and he hasn't been as effective in the last couple fights at making guys fight his game. Hobylov took him down a lot, as you mentioned. Although, of course, later in that fight he looked fantastic when he was potentially losing to Hobylov and came back and got a really was way more aggressive than we're used to seeing him and came back and got that great guillotine. But in the Josh Thompson fight, he got taken down a lot, and that's not his game. He's not a guy who puts himself in the open to get taken down. He likes to control the pace of the fight. He likes to control where the fight is. And he throws a lot of strikes, even if they're not all fantastic strikes or strikes that have a ton of pop to them. As you said, he is improving in that. He looked better at striking in the Hobylov fight, but he's sort of a guy who will, keep touching you, will kind of be a thorn in your side, will again put you against the fence and just keep applying shots, take you down with his wrestling. Just make you fight his game. And Dos Anjos is, as you said, a really well-rounded guy. He's always dangerous on the ground with his jiu-jitsu, but Henderson's a tough guy to sub. Anthony Pettis submitted him, but that was the first time he's ever been submitted, or excuse me, Rocky Johnson submitted him in 2007, but that was in his third pro fight. So,
Yeah.
In his modern MMA career, since he got into the WEC, Henderson has only been submitted by Anthony Pettis. So, that's Dos Anjos may be a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but Dos Anjos is also not the most aggressive guy. Anthony Pettis, aggression and risk-taking is a part of his game, and Dos Anjos is, Henderson doesn't take a ton of risks on the ground, so I can see Henderson getting Dos Anjos down, and not having to worry too much about Dos Anjos' black belt because Henderson will, he'll keep Dos Anjos close. He's not going to take chances on the ground or really overextend himself or put himself in a bad position. And that's really the thing. Dos Anjos, his main issue, I think, is that he is sort of, other than his jiu-jitsu, in most situations he finds himself, he's sort of a guy who's, jack of all trades, master of none. He's a good striker, essentially. He goes to the body a lot. I like that he mixes up body and head and mixes up kicks and punches. Is some power, but generally he doesn't have a ton of knockout wins. But he also isn't a particularly accurate striker. So he's just sort of okay. He's good on the feet, but he's not great. He's not, he can be aggressive at times, and like we saw in the Donald Cerrone fight, where he was, he came out strong in that fight and mixed up shots to the body and head. But we've also seen guys like Evan Dunham kind of control the pace in their fights. So I definitely think Benson can control the pace and get him against the cage. And Dos Anjos is solid at wrestling. He took Donald Cerrone down later in their fight. He's shown some wrestling ability, but he's also not a guy who's going to really set up his wrestling. He's not a guy who's going to pursue the takedown aggressively. And, same with the takedown defense. We've seen guys like Khabib Nurmagomedov ragdoll him, but, generally most guys have a hard time taking Dos Anjos down. But the point is, Dos Anjos is a guy who oftentimes fights other people's game, and he's competitive, and he's good at it, but he's not a guy who is really going to push the pace, and Benson Henderson is a guy you have to push the pace against. You have to be like Josh Thompson and really go after the takedowns, like Hobylov and Thompson did. You have to, or especially like Anthony Pettis, getting the body kicks in early against Benson Henderson, fighting him in the open and hurting him in the open, and then taking risks on the ground and getting that triangle or that armbar, excuse me. Dos Anjos just doesn't do that, so I think he's going to have problems with Benson Henderson. I think the fights you saw against Frankie Edgar and the fights you saw against Nate Diaz, I think it's going to be somewhere in between there. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be as dominant as the Diaz fight, but I also don't think that Dos Anjos is going to apply the same type of resistance that we saw, Frankie Edgar. Because Dos Anjos just isn't as good of a striker. I think Dos Anjos will be put against the fence. I think he'll, get a takedown here or there maybe. He'll be able to escape and strike at distance for a bit and, maybe win a round or two. But I just don't see Dos Anjos being able to really hurt Benson Henderson consistently in this fight. And I don't see Dos Anjos, out-wrestling Henderson consistently. So I think most of this fight's going to be where Benson Henderson wants it. Henderson, as I said, has great cardio. He has experience going 5 rounds. Dos Anjos hasn't had any cardio problems, but he's never gone 5 rounds before. So, yeah, this to me is a big advantage for Benson Henderson. There's always the chance Dos Anjos submits him. There's always the chance he knocks him out. He has both of those things. Again, decent striker, but this really is Benson Henderson's fight to lose.
Okay. And appears looks like everyone's picking Henderson also.
Yep, and odds, Henderson is the biggest favorite. Actually, the second biggest favorite. Ben Saunders is the biggest favorite on this card.
Yeah, over the minus 350. Ben Saunders was.
But Henderson's close, minus 320. Dos Anjos plus 260.
I think it's a bit high.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit.
High.
At the same time, I definitely think Henderson's going to win the fight. So.
Likewise.
I wouldn't really put money on Dos Anjos.
Yes. Not that we encourage betting.
No. I mean, maybe Tad does, but he's not here.
But yeah. He's the perfect guy to encourage betting. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
You have to say. It's been a wonderful 2 hours. So, brush your teeth, eat all your vitamins, and we'll catch you all next week. Right? Wait. Yeah.
Yeah, for that amazing UFC 177 card.
Whoa. Project 7, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Take care, everyone.